They handed me a bill for $11,000. Then my own father looked me in the eye and said, "You've got this, right? It's the least you can do. I am a forensic accountant. I have spent 12 years untangling financial fraud for corporations, law firms, and 3 federal cases. I know how money moves through a family the way a surgeon knows which artery to cut." And that night, sitting at a table with 22 relatives who hadn't said my name in 4 years, I understood in about 30 seconds exactly what kind of operation I had just walked into. The question isn't what I did next. The question is what I said to the restaurant manager before I even sat down. My name is Marcus, and this is the story of the dinner that my family spent 3 months planning to destroy me, and the 8 minutes it took me to dismantle it completely. If you have ever been the person in your family that everyone expects to fix things, fun things, and then disappear until the next emergency, stay with me. Because what happened that night changed something in me that therapy alone couldn't touch. But first, let me paint you the picture so you understand exactly what I walked into. The restaurant was called Solterra. It is the kind of place where the bread basket costs $14 and the sommelier speaks to you in a whisper like he's delivering classified intelligence. My brother Darian had made a reservation for a private dining room. 22 people. 3 generations. My parents at the head of the table, my 2 brothers, their wives, my aunts, my uncle from Raleigh who I genuinely had not seen since 2019, and a collection of cousins who looked at me when I walked in like I was a celebrity they had been briefed about in advance. The table already had 2 bottles of wine open. Not house wine. I clocked the label from the doorway. A 2017 Barolo that retails for around $280 a bottle. There were charcuterie boards, a seafood tower with king crab legs still steaming, and a laminated prix-fixe menu that I had not been told about when Darian texted me the address 6 days earlier. He had texted, "Dad wants to reconnect. Dinner Saturday. Can you come?" That was the entire message. And now I was standing at the entrance of a private dining room containing 22 people and what I estimated, in about 4 seconds of professional habit, to be approximately $7,000 to $9,000 worth of food and alcohol already in motion, with the final bill still to come. My father stood up when he saw me. He smiled the way men smile when they have already won something. He spread his arms and said, "Marcus, my son, we have missed you. Come sit. We saved you the chair at the end." He put me at the opposite end of the table from him, alone, with a clear sight line to every face in the room. Then, 40 minutes later, when the dessert menus arrived, he cleared his throat, tapped his glass, and said, loud enough for every person in that room to hear, "Marcus has always been the successful one in this family. He knows how to handle things. Marcus, you've got this, right? It's the least you can do after everything we've given you." 22 people looked at me, and I looked at my father, and I thought, you have no idea who I actually am. But let me back up, because to understand what I did next, you need to understand the 14 years that built the man sitting at that table. I am the oldest of 3 boys. My brothers Darian and Corey are 4 and 7 years younger than me respectively. I was the first in my family to finish a 4-year degree, then a master's program, then a certification that took 2 years of evening study while working full-time. My parents made enormous sacrifices for me early on, and I knew it, and I carried that knowledge the way some men carry debt. Silently, with interest accumulating. By the time I was 31, I was earning enough that saying no to my family felt like a character flaw. So I didn't say it. I covered my parents' property tax bill when the account ran short. $4,300, written off as just helping out. I paid for Corey's DUI attorney. $8,500. I gave Darian money for a down payment on a truck he wanted for a business he described in 2 sentences and never started. $6,000. When my mother needed a root canal that her insurance classified as cosmetic, I did not ask questions. $2,200. When my father's brother, Uncle Roy, had a medical gap that threatened his apartment, I wired money before he even finished the sentence. $3,800. I kept a spreadsheet, not because I expected repayment. I kept a spreadsheet because numbers were the only way I knew how to tell myself the truth about what was happening. By the time I turned 35, I had transferred a total of $61,400 to various members of my immediate and extended family over 9 years. $61,400. And I want to be clear because this matters later. I am not telling you that to claim victimhood. I am telling you that because I need you to understand the psychology of what was happening inside me, and what was happening inside them, and how those two things became the same problem with two different faces. The fastest way to keep peace in my family was to remove the obstacle before anyone had to ask for it. I learned that before I was 12 years old. My father had a temper that didn't come with a warning light. My mother managed him by preemptively smoothing everything in his path. And I, the oldest, the responsible one, the smart one, learned to do the same. By my mid-30s, I hadn't been asked for money in years. I had simply been positioned near problems until I felt the pressure and produced the solution. It is a system as elegant and invisible as any financial fraud I have ever been paid to detect. Then came the year everything cracked. My brother Darian wanted $50,000. Not a request. He had found a commercial property he wanted to convert into a barbershop and event space. He had a vision, he said. He had a plan, he said. He texted me a screenshot of a Zillow listing at 11:17 on a Tuesday night. I asked him for a business plan. He sent me a voice note explaining the vibe. I asked him for projected revenue numbers. He sent me a link to someone else's successful barbershop in Atlanta. I asked him when he had last held a steady income for more than 8 months. He did not respond. For days later my father called me. Not to ask. To tell me. He said, "Darian needs this. The family needs this. You've done well, Marcus. You know what it means to have people behind you." And I said no. I said no clearly, without apology, and with a calm that surprised even me. I said, "I looked at what Darian sent me. There is no viable plan here. I love him and I am not funding this." My father's voice went very quiet. He said, "Then I don't know who you are anymore." He removed me from the family group chat that same evening. My mother sent me a text 2 hours later that said, "I hope you know what you've done." I did not hear from any of them for 4 years. For years. Do you know what 4 years of silence from your entire family of origin actually feels like? I want you to understand this because the silence is the part that almost broke me in a way that none of the money ever did. For the first 8 months, I waited. I am embarrassed by how much I waited. I checked my phone with the specific hope of a message from my mother, the same way I had checked it as a teenager hoping she'd call when I was staying at a friend's house. There is a particular humiliation in being 40 years old and still needing your parents to tell you that you are not a bad person. I started therapy in year 2. My therapist, Dr. Ellison, is a man with the delivery of a tax attorney and the precision of a surgeon, and he had no interest in making me feel better about myself until I was ready to tell the truth about myself. The truth was this: I had not simply been exploited. I had built the machine. Every time I produced money before anyone asked, I had taught my family that financial pressure on Marcus yields a result. Every time I avoided conflict by removing the obstacle, I had confirmed that the obstacle was me and my boundaries and not their demands. I had been operating inside a system I designed, funded, and maintained for over a decade, and then I had the nerve to be confused when it kept running. Dr. Ellison said something in our 7th session that I wrote in my phone and have never deleted. He said, "Marcus, you don't miss your family. You miss the feeling of being necessary. There's a version of you that can't imagine being loved without being useful, and that version of you will always be available to the people who need a resource, not a relationship." I sat with that for 6 months. I want to say I healed cleanly and completely. I did not. But I got to a place where I understood my own architecture. And understanding your architecture is the only way you can choose to rebuild it. Then, in the 4th year of silence, my mother added me back to the family group chat. Not with a phone call. Not with a private message. She simply re-added me the way you re-add a contact you accidentally deleted, and posted a photo of a Sunday dinner I had not been invited to, captioned with a prayer emoji. 3 days later, Darian texted me directly. He said, "We all want to fix this. Can you come to dinner Saturday? Dad wants to see you." No apology. No acknowledgement. Just an invitation delivered like a summons. I told 2 people at work what was happening. My colleague Renata said, "Marcus, that is a setup. Do not go." My friend and supervisor Leonard said, "I know you're going to go, so just be smart about it." Leonard knows me. I went because I am, at my core, still someone who wanted his father to look at him like he mattered. I am telling you that plainly because I think pretending otherwise would be dishonest, and this story doesn't work if I present myself as someone who had it all figured out. But I also went because I am a forensic accountant who had spent 4 years getting honest about the mechanisms of manipulation. And I had a very specific plan. Here is what I knew walking into Solterra. When a family orchestrates a group dinner at a high-end restaurant with a private dining room and a prix-fixe menu, and invites 22 people, and seats the target at the far end of the table, and opens the wine before the target arrives, that is not a reconciliation. That is a settlement negotiation where only one party knows the terms. I had spent 12 years watching people construct financial traps. This one was not sophisticated. It relied entirely on one assumption, that the social pressure of 22 witnesses and a public request would paralyze me the way it always had before. They did not know that the man who walked into that restaurant was not the man who had left 4 years ago. I arrived 18 minutes early. I asked to speak with the manager. His name was Dominic. I told him calmly and professionally that I was attending a private party in the back room, that I was not the host, that I was not a co-host, and that under no circumstances was my card to be placed on the bill, added to a tab, used as a backup, or mentioned in connection with this reservation. I told him I would be settling my individual portion only, and I handed him my business card and asked him to note it in the reservation file. Dominic had the practiced composure of someone who manages expensive human drama for a living. He looked at my card. He looked at me. He said, "Understood, sir. I'll make sure the front-of-house team is briefed." I said thank you, and I walked into the dining room, and I sat down at the chair at the end of the table. And I waited. My father made his toast at 9:42. I remember the exact time because I had my phone face up on my knee and I looked at it while he was speaking, not because I was being rude, but because I wanted to remember every detail of what was about to happen. He said Marcus has always been the successful one. He knows how to handle things. He's got this, right? It's the least you can do after everything we've given you. And 22 people looked at me, and I looked back at them, all of them, slowly, like I was reading a document and taking notes. And then I looked at my father and I smiled, and I said, "I appreciate that, Dad. I really do." And then I said nothing else. My father's smile held for about 4 seconds. Then it started to do something else. He looked at Darian. Darian looked at his wife. My mother looked at her hands. The dessert came. The coffee came. The second Barolo was finished. At 10:26, the server brought the check presenter to the table and placed it in front of my father, because my father had made the reservation, and the reservation file now contained a note in Dominic's handwriting. My father opened the presenter. He looked at the number inside. Then he looked at me. The total was $11,240. He slid the presenter down the table toward me without saying a word. Just pushed it across the white tablecloth in front of 22 people like it was a document I needed to sign. I slid it back, gently, without anger, the way you return something that simply doesn't belong to you. I said, "That's yours, Dad. I've covered my own. Dominic already has it." There was a silence in that room that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Not because it felt like victory. Silence never feels like victory when it involves the people you grew up loving. But it felt like something I had never felt in my family before. It felt like the truth taking up exactly as much space as it deserved. My father's card was declined on the first attempt. Darian's card covered half. 3 cousins split the remainder. I watched this happen from my seat at the end of the table, and I did not feel triumphant, and I did not feel guilty, and both of those absences were new. I hugged my mother on the way out. She held on longer than I expected. She didn't say anything. Neither did I. I texted Dr. Ellison that night. Just 2 words. It held. He replied the next morning. "Of course it did. You built it." Here is what I want to leave you with, because I think this story is useless if it ends at the restaurant. The version of me that walked into Solterra that night was not someone who had healed from being financially exploited. He was someone who had done the harder and less comfortable work of understanding why he had been so available for it. The money was never the real wound. The real wound was the belief that being useful was the price of admission for being loved. And no amount of boundary setting fixes that belief. Only the long, slow, unglamorous work of learning that you are worth something in a room where you haven't paid for anything. I still have the spreadsheet. $61,400 across 14 years. I no longer look at it with anger. I look at it the way I look at old case files, as a record of a pattern that has been solved. My father has not spoken to me since that night. My mother texts occasionally. Darian sent me a meme 3 weeks later, no context, just a meme, and I think for him that might actually be an apology. I am not waiting for the version of the story where everyone sits down and acknowledges what happened and we cry together and it gets fixed. That version requires them to see something they have spent decades teaching themselves not to see. But I am also no longer the man who needs their perception of me to feel real. That, more than anything I said or did at that table, is the thing I am most proud of. If any part of this landed somewhere inside you, I think you already know which part. And I think you already know what it means.